morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Josh. Yeah, doing well. Sitting here in my self-isolation accommodation, which is very comfortable, with slightly variable internet, but it's great that we have internet today so we can talk.
Absolutely, we can. Talking about faithfulness. So I have a couple of questions I would like to maybe we can discuss some kind of thoughts on, really. My first question to you, though, is do you have a story of God's faithfulness in your life?
When asked that question, it's almost like, well, where do you begin? Because I guess to me, God's faithfulness is just something that I see, experience, recognize kind of every day. There's an old hymn that says, "Great is your faithfulness." I'm going to forget the words now, but it says, "Your mercies are new every morning. Your love is unchanging. As you have been, you forever will be." And I think to me that kind of captures God's faithfulness. That what He's been is what He is now, is what He'll always be, and there's that kind of lovely consistency. But in terms of a specific story, for me, when I think of God's faithfulness to me, my mind always goes back to when I, in my early 30s, trained at theological college. And it was a time when I just experienced God's faithfulness in a way that had kind of impacted me and stuck with me over the years. I was at the time before I went to theological college, I was working in IT, and I just felt a definite nudge from God to go and do this. And there was a scary dimension to it because I was in a good job, I had a flat and a mortgage, so I gave that up and went to train. And I remember one time when I was not long at theological college, and I was paying fees and bills, and I hadn't yet sold my flat, and it was on the market, and I was conscious that I had enough to pay this month's mortgage, and then next month I just didn't have money, and there was the mortgage to pay, and there was college bills and all of that coming up, and I'd gone out for a walk for a discussion with God. Maybe not quite a heated discussion, but a mildly anxious discussion with God along the lines of, "Lord, come on, you've got to sort this." And I stopped, as I was praying, I stopped and leaned over a fence, and there was a field and some cows on the field. And I just felt God say something to me, and it was a verse from one of the Psalms, and roughly translated it was, "I own the cattle on 1,000 hills." And I was just looking out at all these cows munching on the grass in the field, and it was just that reminder, God kind of saying to me, "I've been in the business of being faithful to my people for generations through the years, and I've been faithful to you up to now. Trust me." The mortgage, a buyer did appear for the flat, and everything got cleared, and I got the money for the mortgage 2 days before the payment was due, and I had no money available otherwise. And there were times when I needed a specific amount of money and didn't tell anybody about the specific amount of money. And there was once or twice when it was that exact amount of money that came in, kind of like God saying, "Are you getting this yet?"
I mean, it could be coincidence, but
yeah, absolutely, yeah. There was one occasion when an envelope with cash was just slid under my door. That was a time when I just saw God's faithfulness in action.
That's amazing. I love to hear people's stories, their experiences of God just not letting them down, like you say.
Yeah.
Time when you still had your bills to pay and you were waiting around for money, how would you say that faithfulness God's faithfulness or faithfulness to God is a different aspect to just sort of hoping for the best.
Sometimes I kind of got to the stage with some of that of sort of living almost kind of on the edge of not having enough on a regular basis, and there were times when I kind of thought, oh, I've got it. I know God's going to take me up to the wire and He's going to provide. That's fine. And then it's just like, time and again, I found that God sort of like shifted the wire closer to the edge than I ever thought possible.
Okay.
But just that. But I think that's part of God's faithfulness as well. That His faithfulness towards His children doesn't just involve providing for them what they want. It's actually about stretching us into being who He wants us to be.
So a kind of God uses it to grow us in that situation. It's take us out of our comfort zone, I suppose.
When I was a kid, I used to like going to like amusement arcade places, and they're quite old fashioned now, but the sort of slot machines where you'd put. When I was a kid, it was 2 pence. You'd put in or 5 pence or something, and you'd pull this big lever.
Yeah.
And the cherries would line up, and then you'd get this cascade of 2 pences would fall out. And it's not like God is some sort of heavenly slot machine where I say, Lord, I need this, and He then provides it. The one thing that He promises more than anything else in the Bible, throughout kind of all the way through the Bible, again and again and again, the promise that you hear from God is, I will be with you. And for me, knowing God with me gives me a strength that kind of changes everything. But what about you, Josh? Where have you experienced God's faithfulness in your life?
I think, like you say, to know God's presence consistently. So when I am struggling, when I'm not sure if I'm going to make what decision to make, if I'm happy, if I'm joyful about a situation that has happened, or people that I've met, or some way that God has come through, that I'm aware of God's consistent presence. I find for me the best way for me to tune up to God's presence is through music, and I will sit at home at the piano and I will play. Sometimes I will play worship songs. Sometimes I will play my own worship song. Sometimes I will play and just sing whatever comes into my head. And it can be about how I'm feeling and just crying out to God. And so, and in those times particularly, I experience the presence of God. I can feel like someone else is in the room, but no one else has come in physically. It's God's aura, I suppose, within the room. And no matter how I'm feeling, God's presence shows up. God is faithful to me in that way.
I love that phrase, God's consistent presence. I think that's just a really good kind of shorthand for this word, faithfulness.
Now, I have one more question for you, Bill, before we run out of time together. With the fruity flavors that we've been discussing, we've been talking as them being part of one fruit, the fruit of the Spirit. So how do you see faithfulness interacting with all of the other fruit that we have, or parts of the fruit that we have so far discussed, in goodness, in kindness, in love, in joy?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of looking at the fruit of the Spirit, and this awareness that it's not like, I mean, yes, we're looking at them separately, but they are all together the fruit of the singular fruit of the Spirit, that that this is the character of God, that he's all these things, and when he comes and dwells in us, he helps us to be all these things. I guess for me, what faithfulness brings to the party, if you like, or brings to the fruit bowl, is it's the word always. So if the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, etc., then what faithfulness brings is, when we look at God, when we look at Jesus, he is always loving, always joyful, always peaceful, always patient, kind, gentle, self-controlled, and it's that consistency. It's not that sometimes we experience God as loving and other times not. Who he is always the same. And yeah, sometimes we struggle to see that because we filter it through all of our stuff and experience and other things that God needs to sort of shape and heal in us for us to experience these things ourselves. But then within us, as God by his Spirit lives inside us and shapes our lives, that consistency, so that people experience from us love and joy and peace in that kind of consistent way.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. I think we'll leave it there on that point, but always a pleasure to chat to you, and hopefully we'll have you back on the sofa again soon.
Yes, absolutely. That will be good. And hopefully soon it'll be real Sunday live again.
Absolutely.
Watch this space.
Isn't that great? I just love it, the fact that even under these circumstances, we can still have input, and especially from Bill as well, for him to be able to share part of his story, share some of his wisdom and insight into God's character and God's nature. And I love what he said, that God's faithfulness is about his consistent nature to always be loving and kind and good and joy and gentleness and all of those things that we have been speaking about. That God's faithfulness is about him always being consistent in nature. And I really, really love that. So thank you so much to Josh and to Bill for putting that kind of Zoom interview together so that he could share in that way. So I'm going to move into a time where I'm going to look at a little bit from the Bible about faithfulness. But before I do that, I kind of have a little bit of a quiz.
A quiz?
A quiz for you. I mean, it's not an extensive quiz because it's only 3 questions.
Well, we know how well this went at Christmas time, at Christmas when we pre-recorded.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if you haven't seen our Christmas and New Year pre-records, please go find them.
Go find Josh embarrassing himself, not knowing any of the answers.
It was wonderful. It was a wonderful time. So, faithfulness. So I thought I would look at kind of the records for the longest something.
Oh, okay.
And
sure.
you just have to tell me how long. So the first one that I came up with is, what is the longest officially recorded marriage? What do you think? How long is the longest officially recorded marriage?
I mean, some couples have been. I mean, my grandparents have been married a long time. I think.
How long is long, Josh?
Now you're embarrassing me, aren't
you?
Sorry,
Josh's
granny in the week.
Sorry, Josh's granny.
I think I'm going to go with 85 years.
Oh!
You're close.
Oh, that's so close. That is so close. It is 86 years.
I'll take that. I mean, close enough.
Specifically, it's 86 years and 290 days.
290 days.
Yeah, so that's a long time, isn't it, to be married? I mean, there's other longer marriages, some would argue, but they're technically not official marriages. I don't know really what that means.
Okay,
but that's the longest officially recorded marriage. 86 years and 290 days. Something to aspire to.
Absolutely.
Okay, my next one, longest career. So I'm going to assume this is just within the same company. If someone has stuck at the same job in the same company, then even well, that's a
Okay.
bigger medal,
Yeah,
but I'm gonna say, so longest career, so staying with the same company.
Staying with the same company for, let's say, a little bit less than the marriage.
Okay.
I think it's going to be about 66 years.
No, you're way off.
Way off.
Way off.
Great.
Way off. It is 81 years
Wow.
and 85 days
My goodness.
at a textiles manufacturer.
I was going to say that makes more sense now.
Textiles
It's gonna be some poor
manufacturer,
child
people.
that was in a factory initially. No.
I don't know. It's just someone
that would
that's
make sense, maybe.
It's just someone who has belonged to a textiles manufacturer for 81
Wow,
years.
that is commitment.
I mean, I think I'm still going to be working when I'm 81 by the time I get to 81, but I can't imagine being in the same job when I'm, I don't know, for 81 years.
never
I mean,
know.
I wouldn't be able to be because
You could sit here and do Sunday Live.
for 81, well, I'm already a little bit too old to do that. But anyway, let's move on. Okay, so my final one is the longest reigning monarch.
Okay.
The longest reigning
So,
monarch.
Well, the British monarchy's gotta have some. They're going to be placing highly at any rate, aren't they? And I'd say the British monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, current reigning monarch. She's the
Yep.
longest of the British monarchs. So
Okay.
she's got to be throwing some punches.
Okay. Possibly not literally, though.
Possibly not literally, but why not? Is there going to be?
Is there someone longer? That's the question.
And then the next question is, do I know how long Queen Elizabeth II
Well,
has been on?
I'm gonna shimmy you along. So go on
Yeah.
then, longest
Okay,
reigning
I'm
monarch.
gonna go with Queen Elizabeth, but I'm not sure how long she's been.
So Queen Elizabeth II
Queen
has
Elizabeth II.
been reigning
Yep.
for, in April it will be 69 years.
All right,
So longer or shorter?
69 years. Let's go with it.
69
Her
years?
exactly.
Yeah, okay, so she is not the longest reigning monarch ever. So for Britain, she is.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not in the world. That is King Louis XIV of France.
Oh yeah, the one who got his head chopped off.
Obviously, for 72 years and 110 days.
Before he met his brutal end. That's
72
there
years
you go.
and 110
72
days.
years.
There we go.
Wow.
There you go.
Dedication.
There you go, indeed. So, in all three of those examples, as incredible as they are, and as faithful as you could argue that each of those people have been, God is still more faithful. God's faithfulness goes beyond even those accolades. And there are so many examples in the Bible. There are so many examples in the Bible where we see God's faithfulness in action. We see God's faithfulness in action. So I'm just going to list some of those. I don't have time to go into all of them, but I thought if I just list a few, then maybe you could look them up a little bit later if you wish. So some of the ways in which we have seen God's faithfulness in action in the Bible. So it's when he gave Abraham children. It's when he rescued the Israelites out of slavery and parted the Red Sea. We also see God's faithfulness in Ruth in being faithful to her mother-in-law. We also see God's faithfulness in saving 3 men from a burning furnace. In the story of Queen Esther, in Noah's Ark, in King David, in Daniel and the lion's den, in the numerous healings in the New Testament, and also, ultimately, God's faithfulness in sending Jesus to us to save you and I. However, the story that I want to focus on today is a little bit after God brought the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt and after he parted the Red Sea. After all of that happened, the Israelites then wandered in the desert for 40 years. And now the Israelites in that time, so I'm in the Old Testament in this, and the Israelites in that time, they were not faithful to God. They made statues and idols and they worshipped them. But when God said that he would bring them out of slavery, that is what he meant. He meant that he was going to do that. He was going to bring them into a promised land. And God does what he says he is going to do. And I think this story, it shows off so many of the other fruit of the Spirit as well. And it shows off the real character of God. God rescued them from the pit of slavery. And on that journey, they doubted him, and then they would call out to him. And then they would doubt him and call out to him. They wandered through this desert, and God provided for them, leading the way day and night. He looked after them. He gave them food. He cared for their needs, and they still decided to make idols and gods of their own. And they still whined about being in the desert, and they even commented that they would have been better off staying in slavery in Egypt. How did God not have enough of them? How did God continue to love them and be kind to them and be good to them and stay faithful to the promise that he had made? How did he do that? And I think Bill touched on that when he said it's part of his faithfulness is the always part, the always loving, the always kind, the always gentle, the always good. And I think that part of God's character is how he managed to keep doing that. He said that he would lead them to the promised land that would flow with milk and honey. And God made a promise, and God is faithful to those promises, even when we aren't faithful in ours. Excuse me. So God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's what the Bible tells us. The Bible also tells us so many other promises. The Bible tells us that God purposefully and wonderfully made you and I. The Bible tells us that God promises that he will never leave us, that he will stay faithful with us. It also tells us that God has a plan and a future for us. He promises to protect our hearts and minds, and he also promises to bless us. The God who remained faithful with the Israelites, wandering through the desert for 40 years, is the same God who remains faithful to you and I, even when we behave more like the Israelites than we live like God is asking. We've had some things come in. So firstly, I think the real life fruit that is like faithfulness. Someone has said a hazelnut, brackets, yes, Josh, technically a fruit. I Googled it.
Interesting.
And
hey,
they say
I'm only asking questions here. I'm only asking questions.
They say a hazelnut because it basically lasts forever, and it is also so delicious in Belgium chocolate.
Very good, very good. I mean, it's commonly used with chocolate, isn't it? Hazelnut.
Yes, indeed it is.
And it is super tasty.
Indeed. And then someone else said on the meaning of faithfulness to them, I think faithfulness is not always knowing why, but knowing that there is a reason for things that happen, even if things seem dark, and even if things seem dark, there will always be a light.
Oh, I love that picture. That picture of light.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and it's something that we can definitely all resonate to, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That actually morning always comes. The sun always rises again. So, yeah, they are some really good, interesting things. I don't know why I put the phone down for some questions. Some questions. Okay, Josh, are you ready?
I'm braced, ready.
Okay, can faithfulness be bad?
Ooh, good question.
Can faithfulness be bad?
I suppose it comes down to what you have, what you are committing to.
Okay.
So you could be faithful to God, for a very easy example, or you could be, I suppose you could be described as faithfully. Oh, could you though? Could you be described as faithfully doing something that's not good?
Well, you could have misplaced faithfulness, couldn't you? So you could be faithful to something that is not good for you, or faithful to something that is bad, harmful, or something that's just not good for you. So I think you can have. So can faithfulness be bad? I think it can be, in the terms of you can have misplaced faithfulness.
Okay, so you've got to be careful what you put your faithfulness in.
Yeah, because I think we can be faithful to the wrong people who lead you down a different path in life that maybe isn't good for you, and somewhere that you don't particularly want to go.
Yeah, I could see that.
You could be faithful to a damaging relationship. So I don't know if I would say faithfulness is bad, but I think you can have misplaced faithfulness. I don't know.
Yeah, interesting.
Any other thoughts?
No, I think that kind of covers it, really.
Yeah, and
faithfulness as a quality is good, but in the same way that love as a quality is good, but can be twisted into lust in sort of pursuing those the wrong things.
Yeah.
So in the same way, faithfulness as a thing is a good quality, but like you say, it can be misplaced.
Yeah, and I also wonder actually if even faithfulness in good things, in right things, could lead you to dangerous places.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, I don't think faithfulness is always going to be rainbows.
Jesus doesn't promise us an easy ride. Jesus promises life in all of its fullness, the highs and the lows. And so in pursuing a faithful relationship with Jesus, it's not always going to be comfy, cozy. It's going to be, it can be a challenging thing to do when everyone around you is not so accepting of your choices, your life choices, and in that faithfulness to Jesus, it can make your life particularly uncomfortable. Yeah. But I wouldn't say that it's still a bad thing to do. I
also think actually a really good example of that is the disciples. So Jesus had 12 disciples, so like 12 really close friends that did a lot of things with him. In the Bible, there's a lot of documentation about them. And actually, the disciples were so faithful to Jesus that even when Jesus was about to die and be crucified, Peter, one of the disciples, was asked, "Aren't you a follower of Jesus?" And in that moment, if he had said yes, he could have easily have been captured, arrested, maybe even killed, thrown in prison. Something could have happened. So actually staying faithful to Jesus, staying faithful to great things, could land you in an awful lot of trouble.
After Jesus goes back up to heaven, we follow the story through the book of Acts of the disciples, and many of them are chased out of cities, put in prison, killed.
So I think actually faithfulness is one of those things, isn't it? I think
it's dangerous. It can be dangerous.
Yeah.
To lead you to dangerous places.
I think so. But for all of the right reasons, it can lead you to dangerous places. So I think you can have misplaced faithfulness in bad things.
Which can lead you to bad places for wrong reasons.
Yeah. But good faithfulness could also lead you to bad places for all the right reasons. That's a very odd way to phrase it, isn't it?
It's a tricky one to find a black and white answer, isn't it?
Absolutely. So another question.
Good question, though.
Yeah, another question is being faithful the same as being committed?
They're certainly similar. I wouldn't say that it's incorrect to say that God is committed to us. What do you think?
I think, is being faithful the same as being committed? I think they're similar, but part of me wants to say that I think faithfulness is deeper than being committed. It's like being committed is like an outward kind of action, but being faithful is like a heart intention. But even that, I don't think is particularly clear. So I just wonder if being committed is the act. So the act of being committed to someone or something, so a relationship, a cause, that's being committed. But faithfulness is the ongoing act of that commitment. Because I think, like in a wedding, you are committing to being faithful for the rest of your lives, right?
Yeah.
So is being committed, I know, like the starting point, but faithfulness is the ongoing choice
almost
that
the
you make.
intention to commit that you which is not a good way of putting it, but if you
I don't know how clear we're being.
But I guess like you said before, then you can commit to being faithful.
Yeah Possibly. Well, there you go. They are just
Those
a couple of thoughts. Wow. I mean, maybe you guys have much better thoughts than what we've just pieced together. We are just about out of time now. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you to Bill for doing the Zoom interview for us a little bit earlier, and for Josh, who has joined me here this evening. If you have liked this video, if you've enjoyed it, even if that has been laughing at our error in the way that we do things, it's very informal here, then please like and subscribe this video. And if you hit the notification bell, you will be sure to receive a reminder of when we broadcast next, which is next Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. You are more than welcome to join us there, or you can join us here on Sunday Live next week at 7:30 p.m. where our next fruity flavor is gentleness. So do tune in and join us.